Tonight, we have Miss Linda Nelson. And thank you for your patience, Linda. Anyway, Linda holds an EMBA from Queen's University, an Associated Science degree in Horticulture Technology, and a certificate in Landscape Design. She is managed the Native Plant Garden at Winghaven. She's the founder and president of the Charlotte Piedmont chapter of Wild Ones, and she's going to tell y'all about that. And she's got flyers, I think, for people to take. She works at the horticulture department at Central Piedmont and teaches landscape design. So you're in for a real treat to hear her talk tonight. And she is very passionate about native plants, prairie garden, landscape design with native plants. So Linda, I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
Click it on.
I get it.
Okay.
You want to turn the lights a little bit? Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone, again. So those of you on Zoom, while we were waiting, we had some discussions here in the room here. So glad that we're all together now. And I will not stand here the entire time, but I'll stand here most of the time. I usually walk around a lot. And they gave me a wireless mic, so I will be walking around some. Thank you all for staying. I mean, we're halfway through my talk, so I'll try to move it through, but it's an hour presentation. So let's save our questions till the end. I'm happy to stay later if you would like to ask questions. Can you hear me okay in the back? Everybody can hear me fine? Okay, great. And let's see, make sure this moves. I do that. Yep. So she told you, so we couldn't get this to display exactly right. So please look at the slide on your left. What's over here is usually what the presenter sees, and sometimes you'll see a lot of words. I probably won't say all those words, so don't worry about it. Haven't memorized anything. So on Zoom, they can see just my slide. So my slide that I'm talking about is over to the left. Yeah, can y'all see it okay? From over there? Okay, good. So she told you the things that I am doing. I also have my own, I do teach landscape design at Central Piedmont. That's where I got my degree, and in my certificate in landscape design, I just couldn't leave. So I took a part-time job there. I also help take care of the greenhouses and the grounds. So I work about 20, 25 hours a week doing that, as well as some helping with other classes and all. But last year, this year, I got a chance to teach. So I start a week from Tuesdays teaching next semester. I'm also teaching a class, a continuing education class, if anybody's interested, on September 2nd there, that is on gardening for pollinators. So yeah, I love being there. It was great for me. I retired after many, many years in healthcare and healthcare information technology, and I did sales training. So I was in the corporate world. I traveled for 18 years all over the country, even internationally some, and I retired in 2018 and went to Central Piedmont and started my next career. This is my third career, so my retirement career, you might say. I recently got certified as a pollinator steward as well from the Pollinator Partnership, which has been, that was a fun activity. I also started my own business called Be Good Garden Design, where I do garden consultations and garden designs, focusing just on native plants. That's really, as Debbie said, that's what I enjoy. So I got started in gardening when I was a kid. That's my grandmother. They say I look just like her. But she was the one that had the vegetable garden and taught me about gardening. My parents did not garden. And I thank my grandmother for giving me that exposure when I was young. And it wasn't something I studied as an adult or paid a lot of attention to. I plant what I liked and things like that. My ex was in horticulture and did a lot of that. So I was in the corporate world, and that was my thing. But I did try to pass along to my kids a love of gardening as we were gardening. That's my first child. I was pregnant about 9 months with my second there, who might actually be on the Zoom tonight. But I know that many of you that are here are master gardeners, and you talk to people all the time about plants. Isn't it wonderful when you can pass it along to the younger generation, especially the love of native plants and how we can really affect the future of this planet and the wildlife here. So I just think it's great to be able to talk to I talk to schools sometimes, as I know a lot of the master gardeners here do. So I'm here representing Wild Ones. And once I found out about, I started my program, you know what kind of interrupted my school was COVID. And during COVID, Wild Ones, I found out about Wild Ones. They had a lot of webinars and such, and was really impressed and found out there wasn't a chapter. There's only one chapter in North Carolina at the time. So I started the chapter here. And what I loved about it is it's about native plants in the landscape, education and exposure to people about how to make a difference in their own yards with native plants. And that's what I loved about this organization. And we do a lot of activities here at the local level. And so we'd love for you to join us. And what we do is connecting people and native plants for a healthy planet. So that's really what it's about. So I'll tell you a little bit more about it. It started in 1977. Now, I know what I was doing in 1970. It certainly wasn't thinking about natural gardening and such like that. So, but these people, small group, I think it was 9 people, got really interested in it. They went to a session at Audubon in Wisconsin, and they called themselves the Wild One Garden Club. And so it all blossomed into Wild Ones. And now there's over 120 now, 121, 22 chapters in the country. And it's in about 34 states. And we have 4 chapters now in North Carolina. So we're adding about over 400 members a month. It's just amazing. I feel like it's a trend. I feel like we're near the tipping point. I was telling Daniel, I feel like really this is really catching on. And I'm just so pleased with it. As Debbie said, I'm very passionate about it. So we are the Charlotte Piedmont chapter. If you join Wild Ones and it asks you a chapter, then you get to pick your chapter and you become a member of our chapter. So that's how it works. We don't have any membership dues at the local level. So you get all the benefits of that. So we're going to talk about a little bit about the biodiversity crisis, a little bit about native plants. I did look at the topics you've had this past year here with the Successful Gardener series, and I saw Lisa Tompkins' presentation, which was awesome. I love Lisa. She is just a wealth of knowledge, and she gave a talk on invasive plants, but she talked a lot about native plants as well. You know, invasive plants are typically non-native, and they take over the Bradford pears, the English ivy, you know, the privet, all those kind of things. So I'm not going to repeat a lot of that. So I recommend, if you haven't seen that one, to go back. It's on the Successful Gardener website, and go back and look at that. Plus, she had some really good handouts. So I recommend, if you don't have those, to go back and get those as well. So I commend you for keeping those things available for the Union County folks here. So, but most of what we're going to talk about is landscaping for wildlife, what that means. And then I'm going to talk about design principles. So if you want to design in your yard with some aesthetics and making it look, you know, really cared for and put together, I'm going to go over some design principles, since that's what they asked me to speak about, was landscape design. And so I'm going to take a sip of water here. So we are in a biodiversity crisis. I don't know if you're aware of that, but we are losing insects. 40% of our insects have declined in the last 40 years, which means we've lost birds, because you got to have birds, you have to have insects. How many have bird feeders in your yard with seeds? Yeah, we almost all do, right? And that's great. We love watching them, and they love the seed, but they can't feed their babies seeds. They feed their babies insects or caterpillars, something soft that they can jam down their throat, right? They throw it down their throat, and there has to be something soft and full of protein. Caterpillars are full of protein, and insects. So if you want birds, you've got to have insects, and especially caterpillars. So it's drastic losses, which affects the rest of the food web, right? They're the basis of the food web. We're kind of up here. So we really rely on those. In 2017, and this was a turning point. There was a study in Germany. It was done in nature preserves in Germany. So not just any field anywhere. It was over 17 years, and they published it in 2017 that they lost 70% of their flying insects in those 17 years. That really just it hit like a bomb, because the stories got picked up all over Europe, in the United States. And this is a Reuters. I love the picture. That's why I always start with this. But if you look at the slide, that is the cover of the New York Times magazine, where they said the insect apocalypse is here. Washington Post said insects around the world are in crisis. The Guardian in England said plummeting insect numbers threaten the collapse of nature. And the National Academy of Science said nature is under siege. Many believe the world has entered the sixth mass extinction. Losing insects is really not good for us, y'all. So that's why I care about native plants. It's not for the plants, it's for the insects. It's for the wildlife. That is my passion. And to help them, we have to plant more natives. So Doug Tallamy, how many have heard of Doug Tallamy? I have some of his books up here. He wrote this one, I think it was 2009, quite a long time ago. I've read it a lot. I got lots of little tabs here. But in 2020, soon after this study, he wrote this one, and this was Nature's Best Hope. You can see it on the Zoom. It's a wonderful book. If you buy one book to learn about this, that is a good one. He's actually made a children's version. It's great. I gave this to my grandkids. And so if you have children that would like to read that, it's really good. But what he says, and he's an honorary, by the way, honorary director at Wild Ones, he shares that one of the big mistakes in our approach to conservation is the idea that nature is something we set aside in these parks and state parks and city parks and various things, but something separate. But we have to do it. We have to do it. We can't leave conservation to the conservationists. We need to think about helping the insects in our own land, because most of the land in the United States is private. So so it's really important that we think about that as well. I try not to get on a soapbox, y'all, but it's really hard. I try not to preach, but I'm just passionate about it. So so native plants, and you know, we'll talk a little bit about that. Isn't that a beautiful picture? Beautiful meadow, just so peaceful looking. Love it, love it. So there's a beautiful monarch on a coneflower. Monarchs need milkweed, but they love nectar from other plants too. So there it is on a coneflower. So this is a good definition of what a native plant is. Plants that occur naturally in the ecosystem, in their ecosystem, where they have adapted to the physical conditions and co-evolved with other species in the system. Coevolution is very important, okay? Native plants are the ones that were here before the settlers came over from Europe, okay? When the settlers came over, they brought seeds, they brought plants. That's when the exotic plants started. So we're talking plants that have been here for hundreds, thousands of years and evolved with the insects and developed these really special relationships, and where they need each other. And the poster child for that are the monarchs and the milkweed. How many have heard about that? Most everyone has heard that monarchs have to have milkweed, and it's true. That's why we're dwindling, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But there are hundreds, thousands of those type of relationships. The yucca moth and the yucca plant, they actually need each other. It's not just one needs one the other. They both need each other to pollinate and to exist. So there's a lot of those type of relationships in our ecosystem that are very important. And often we call those, if the butterfly larva needs a certain plant, that plant's called a larval host plant. So the milkweed is the larval host plant for the monarch butterfly. And there's a certain number of those that larval host plants and native plants that are extra special. they take care of and service the most insects, and then we call those keystone plants. Doug Tallamy, I think, coined that for native plants that are the most successful in supporting our insects. And so I have some numbers here from Doug Tallamy's research. 14% of native plants support 90% of our butterflies. And if they support our butterflies, they're home for what? The caterpillars. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the caterpillars there that make a home. And the number one plant, can anybody guess what the number one plant is? Number tree. It's a tree. Number one, oak. If you're going to plant a tree, plant oak, white oak. I have 2 giant willow oaks in my yard, and I have lots of birds, and And so that is important. And I'm pretty sure that Lisa posted that handout. If not, I will add a handout. In fact, I have another handout I'm going to give that will be ready on the website early next week. But that'll be one. I'll give you a list of keystone plants. So 50 to 16% of our native bees are pollen specialists. That means they only get pollen from certain plants. Isn't that interesting? That they rely on certain plants to live. And that's almost 50% of our native bees. You know, honeybees aren't native. I always hate to tell people that. A lot of people don't know, but they're not native. They came over from Europe. And so they really don't need saving. They're cultivated and they're moved around the country. Our native bees are what need saving. Our native bees, because we're losing habitat for them. So very important. So that's about 40% of our native plants provide about 50%, provide for about 50% of our insects. And then 90% of our terrestrial birds, I've already talked about, rely on insects to support their babies. I think Doug Tallamy's research, he has a lot of graduate students, so he does a lot of research with his graduate students, that it takes over 4,000 caterpillars to feed, to fledge a nest of chickadees. 4,000, y'all. And that doesn't mean big caterpillars. I mean, some caterpillars are small up in my oak trees. They're small and they flit all around. And I think that's why I have so many birds. It's because I have so many places for the caterpillars. So why are we losing these native plants? Number one reason is habitat loss. From what I've read and what it's habitat loss. You know, you look at the top picture there, it's a monocrop, right? So it's going to be planted with corn or soybeans or something, right? And that's all that's going to be for acres and acres and acres. There's not anything there for insects or caterpillars, right? So the more of that is less food for the native plant. I mean, for the insects. And then the developments. You see it around Charlotte all the time, right? They clear cut. And I think it's happening in Union County too. They clear cut, put in a subdivision or a bunch of townhomes. Now it's townhomes, right? That's the big rage. And so they clear it all out and don't save any of the trees. And they try to put something back. What do they put back? Turf, non-native plants. And so it affects our insects. That's the bottom line. So oops, I'm going the wrong way now. Uh-oh, Debbie. Oh, space bar. Sorry. Okay. And turf, okay. I mean, I like having some turf. My granddaughter and I like to play badminton. And we play it on my grass, which isn't turf, it's whatever comes up. But turf, sod and turf yards is the number one irrigated crop. It takes more water to irrigate turf in this country than it does crops. And there has been estimated of 63,000, I've heard a couple different terms. This is the one I hear the most, 63,000 square miles of turf in this country. That's bigger than Georgia, if you think about the space. It's a monoculture, so it's kind of a dead zone for the insects that we want, the native insects. And it's takes a lot of time to take care of it, but mostly a lot of chemicals. Pesticides is another reason we're losing our insects, is that there's so many chemicals being used, and a lot of them is in turf. So that's another big reason. So I recommend reducing turf. You're not getting rid of it. I mean, you need it in some places, especially when you have kids. But yeah, you just have to think about it. And Doug Tallamy, I heard him speak one time. He said, you know, if the only time you walk on your grass, your turf, is when you mow it, maybe you don't need as much as you have, right? This is another quote I like. I love quotes. John Muir, I'm sure you've all heard of him. When one tugs at a single thing in nature, it finds it's attached to the rest of the world. We're all part of this nature. We're all part of nature, y'all. We're not separate. And it's not nature for us to control. It's nature for us to enhance and to care for and to be a part of. So why do we want to plant native plants? They're resilient. right? They're adapted to our regional soil conditions. We talked about that already. They require minimal inputs. And by that, I mean, you don't have to fertilize them. They're used to our soils. And in fact, if you amend your soil too much, they're not too happy. They grew up in our soil, right? So and once they're established, you typically don't have to water them unless we have this terrible heat that we've had. I've given a water here or there, just keep an eye on them. But typically you don't have to water them once they're established, once the roots get established, because their roots are really long. Turfgrass roots are about, like this. They need water constantly or they're going to die. That's why they're watered so much, is because they don't have a good root system. Native plants have really long root systems, so they help with stormwater runoff. They can collect the water. The best way to manage stormwater is to manage it where it falls, not to have it run off on the streets and into our streams with oils, and is to manage it where it falls. And native plants are good at that, good at holding erosion and things like that. So you have those problems, look into that. But again, enhancing, you want to put native plants in your yard to enhance biodiversity. And maybe you want to look and see what type of insects you want to help. Maybe you want more monarchs. Maybe you want more spice bush caterpillars and things like that. So you can choose that, and then you're contributing to a healthy ecosystem. So now let's talk about design. And I'm going the wrong way again. Okay, I love this picture. Look at the walkway through that. I'm going to talk about that's an essential part, I think, of a design for native plants, because they're going to look a little more free. I like to call it free, not messy, a little more free in your design, and to have pathways and clean edges and things like that. But I love the pathway here. So let's talk about principles of design. Now this is what I teach and I'm trying to pack a lot of this in an hour to give you a taste of landscape design and how to think about your yard a little differently. So think about the lines in your yard. So when you stand back and you look at what you have now, even sometimes to squint and you can look at them, you can see the forms and the lines in your yard. And the lines can be straight, curved, even a line with maybe you've got some conifers that create a vertical line, or you've got some creepers that do a horizontal line. And all of that is part of the design of your yard. And it can like direct traffic. Walkways through your yard can be with lines of beds and such as that, or how the eye moves through the yard it can be with the lines and at certain points. But there's other things we'll talk about, like so form. Think about forms, and form can be round, upright. It's kind of the shape, the silhouette of what you're putting in. And I should have said this earlier. Doug Tallamy says if you have 70% natives or you work towards that, then you're making a difference. We all have special plants we like that are not native, right? And you can have those. That's okay, as long as they're not invasive. As long as it's not English ivy, it just runs everywhere. But think about, I love the cedars that, they're tall. So just think about the forms of what you have in your yard, and that, think about the balance. We'll talk about balance in a minute, but sometimes those forms can create a balance in your yard of not so much heavy here and nothing here, but to create forms that repeat can be very interesting. And texture, the texture of the plant. Is it soft or is it spiky like a yucca? As I said earlier, there's things that are very soft, like the coreopsis has a very soft leaf to it. So that's the texture you're looking at. And what they say is coarse looking plants, so they're really heavy, and coarse looking plants can make a large space look smaller. And then fine plants can make it feel bigger, like the flowing, like some of the carex, the sedges and things are really flowy, and then color. We all love color in our yard, right? We all go for the flowers. But when someone goes to a garden store, I worked in I worked at Pike's for a while, and everybody wants to buy the one that's got the bloom. And I'd say, why don't you buy the one that's got the buds? Because then you're going to get blooms longer. But everybody goes for everybody loves the color, and it can be great in your yard. It can be subtle and peaceful, or you can get brilliant colors, the bright colors, something eye-catching, and it can create a sense of order, or it can create with chaos, depending on the colors that you pick and how you arrange the colors and such. Yes. Oh yeah, sure. I'm sorry. Yeah. Are you okay? I can walk out here too. So the color wheel, and you've all probably seen the color wheel from school, right? And, but I just bring it up because color is so important. And you look at the primary colors in the middle, of course, and then the secondary colors, and then the tertiary colors is a secondary and a primary together. And so how many people like the purple and yellow? I find so many people like the combination of purple and yellow. And if you look, they're complementary in the color wheel, right? So you can use complementary, you can use analogous, which are colors that are side by side, or monochromatic. So all the same type, like mostly pinks that a lot of people I know like put just pinks in their yard, or yellows and such. And I love the word riotous. University of Georgia calls it that way. It's chaos, but riotous. Like you want them all the colors, right? We're just going to mix it up. Nothing wrong with that. That's a way to do it. It's what you want, what feels good to you. Your yard should be what is important to you and what makes you feel good. And that's part of design. When I talk to customers, it's like, or clients or people I'm working, like consulting with, it's like, what does it mean to you? How do you feel when you go in your yard? Look at these things and why do you like your yard? I'm sure you probably do. What is it about it? Maybe you want to repeat that in some way. That's my time. Okay. So some other things, and this top one is something that I focus on a lot, transition. So your yard is made up of functional spaces, right? You may have a fire pit. Maybe you have a dining table. Maybe you have a place where your kids play. Maybe you have a vegetable garden, a herb garden. And so, you've got all these hodgepodge of stuff in these functional spaces. What kind of transitions can you make between these? Like a little walkway. How do people get from one area to another? How do people get from your door out to the fire pit? So think about the flow in your yard and how you want those transitions to look. And maybe you've got a gazebo, maybe you want some soft things around the gazebo so that it's a peaceful place, but maybe, you're going to transition to something a little coarser and harder over in the other area. So kind of think of the design in that way. And then balance and rhythm. Balance doesn't mean, it doesn't have to be symmetrical. It can be asymmetrical. But if you've got, for instance, say you have a tall house, big house, but one side, it's like a split level kind of thing. And you have all the heavy stuff on that side. It's going to look a little awkward, right? Because this side's short and there's nothing much over here. So it's about balancing the design and not necessarily being symmetrical. Though some people like that formal symmetrical, and that's fine. If that's, it's all a choice. And then focalization, do you want a focal point in your yard, something that catches people's eye right at the front or in the back of your yard somewhere? Simplicity, do you like it simple? Do you like a lot of variety? And look at the proportions of the things you're putting in, that there's that balance along with them and how they all blend together. So that's some of the things that designers look at when they're designing properties. So when you're looking at ecological designing for wildlife, you want to group things together, like more than one. They say what by an odd, 3 to 5 to 7 plants at a time. And the best example I can say that really is helpful for the wildlife, for the insects, for the butterflies, for the bees. I mean, the best way I can describe it is if when you cook dinner for your family, you put the salad in the kitchen, you put the main dish in the dining room, but you put the potatoes in the den, and then you put the dessert in the back. I mean, you have to go here. How long would it take you to eat dinner if you had to eat like that, right? Well, the same for bees. If they go from one flower that's a cone flower, but your other cone flower is way over here, that's not a benefit. So you want groupings or sweeps of plants in your yard. And then think about seasonal interest. I love the red twig dogwoods for winter interest. They're beautiful red osiers. They're beautiful red stems. So think about what your garden's going to look at in the winter. And you know the story of save the stems and leave the leaves, right? Where you want to save the stems when you cut them back in the spring, leave them all winter for the birds and habitat. When you cut them back, leave about 12 to 18 inches. and then put those top stems somewhere behind the shrubs or something, because the insects this next year will create, I could talk all night about this. Most of your native bees live in either the ground or in hollow stems. And so those hollow stems, you're providing habitat for the next year. Because it's not just about providing food for our wildlife. It's just as important to provide habitat. Remember I said we've got a loss of habitat for our wildlife. So habitat is just as important as the food. And consider a water feature, even if it's just a little bird bath. The bees come to my bird bath, the wasp, it's not just for bees, squirrels do too. Yes. Save them, and you can put them in the garden or put them behind the shrubs somewhere off in your garden if you don't want to leave them laying. Yeah, you can just leave them in your yard. The best thing, whatever falls, like the leaves, keep in your yard. If you have to put them in one area, that's fine. But there's a lot of leaving the leaves provides habitat. There's so many insects that overwinter in the leaves. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes. He asked what I said about saving the stems and where to put the stems. So, and those of you on Zoom are not seeing me because I need to project my voice more in the room. So, but yes, saving the stems is very important for our native bees. And leaving a little patch of bare dirt. If you ever see the little holes in the bare dirt somewhere in the parks or in your yard, those are bee homes. Fascinating. Again, strive for the 70% natives, and think of layers in your yard so that everything's not the same height, because wildlife really likes layers. So if you look at this picture, this is a picture from one of the books I have here, Planning in a Post-Wild World. Excellent book. And they talk about layers. So the ground layers, the bottom, I'm sorry, it's not big enough, you can read it really, but and then there's a seasonal theme level layers, what they're talking about there, and then the structural layers, your trees. So when you put all that together, you get something like this, right? So that you've got, if you've got a bird feeder, the birds like to have a tree next to it, or someplace they can hide, a little shrub next to it so they can jump up and get their seeds and go back. It's the same kind of thing, right? It's to have those type of layers in your yard really it's aesthetically beautiful to have those layers, but it's also very important for our wildlife. And that includes birds, insects, and other animals. So with this one, it talks about ground covers and mid-story and canopy. You may not have large trees. Maybe, that's going to take a while to get a large tree, but put something like tulip poplar grows pretty fast. You can think about something like that. And rocks, there's a lot of bees that love to hide, to make homes under rocks. So maybe a little rock somewhere too. You see rockery is one of the things they have. Logs. I keep the stems that fall out of my willow oak, logs. I line some of my beds with logs, and they're great homes for insects as well. So again, if you don't want them in where they're seen, tuck them away behind your shrubs. I just like this picture. Now, I wouldn't have a grass walk, maybe a grass walkway, but you can see layers in here, right? And you see a little balance. They've got the tallest part by their building rather than out somewhere. So they kind of bring that together. I just think it's so pleasing. So we talked a little bit about cues to care before we got started here today. How many of you have an HOA? Someone that governs what you can do? Yeah. So this is really important for you. Is that cues to care just shows that it's not something you just threw out a bunch of seeds and you don't care about, or you're not taking care of your yard. So you want to show that it's intentional, that you planned it, and you care for it. And we have a member that actually convinced his HOA of what he was doing and the importance of what he was doing. His whole front yard is beds of native plants, and they let him go. They passed him. They didn't charge him after all, but he went and made a presentation when he got cited. Someone reported him or something. He got cited to his HOA, and he explained to them what he was doing. So I think, there are ways to that, but this is one way, and not to have have clearly marked pathways. I talked about the stones through the middle of a bed. It shows you planned it, right? Your bed outlines are neat. Maybe line it with rocks. This gentleman on Sunday had little ditches around all of his beds, but you could put not liriope, but something carex, like something native, like a carex around it. So you've got some type of border. Blue-eyed grass can work in that way too. So just show that it's intentional. Put the shorter plants by your sidewalks or at the very front, so it's not so tall and doesn't lay over into the sidewalk and such. And then have an educational signs or certification signs, I should say. So there's a lot of places you can get certified. And I had kids notice my signs. So I'm teaching kids too about signs. And the right one is the newest. That's the wild ones. We just started a certification with wild ones. And but you can put this in your yard, and it really shows your neighbors. It can be educational to your neighbors and shows your neighbors that you have a purpose here. So how do you start? We're doing pretty good on time. I can go to 8:30, right, Debbie? Okay. So how do you get started in planning if you want to plan and design your yard? So study your space. I already talked about that, really looking through half closed eyes and really see what you have, and think about the sun. And if you're new in a place, you may want to, there's a couple apps that you can get that'll show you where the sun is at different times of year in your space, wherever you are. So those are helpful. But if you've been there, you know the sun and the soil, know what you have there in your yard. Microclimates are such that you have certain places in your yard that may be different than other places as far as the sun, the moisture, maybe even the wind, exposure to the road, next to asphalt where it's going to get really hot, or concrete where things are really hot, or backs tucked away in the back. There's lots of different types of microclimates in your yard to consider. And are there any problems you want to solve? Like we talked about erosion. Do you want to, solve any problems? That's a good place to start first, is maybe native plants can help you with that. And what functionality? Are there new functional spaces you want? Maybe you want to put in a vegetable garden. Maybe you want to put in a gazebo somewhere or a fire pit. What would you like to add to your yard that you can build into it? Maybe there's some hardscapes you want. Maybe you want to put in some stone pathways or bird feeders or things like that. Hardscapes are a great way to also add interest to your yard. And then walking patterns. You want to establish some walking patterns through the yard. And then is there anything you want to screen? Any neighbors you want to screen that you can't see? You can look at doing that too. We call this in landscape design inventory and analysis. So you inventory what's there, and then you analyze that. And consider regulations, HOA. Maybe you have city regulations. There are some cities that have rules, that are counties that have some rules. And then maybe there's neighborhood norms that, not going to govern you, but maybe you want to consider some things like that too. So this, I don't know if you can see that. You see this neighborhood here? Look they're all the same practically, right? They probably all got the same shrubs, except there's one different. You see it in the very front? Okay, that large yard belongs to Benjamin Boat. He wrote the book, where is it? I thought I had it. I guess I don't. Garden Revolution? No, that's what Larry Weaver's. Can't think of the name of it. But there's more recent books called Prairie Up, Prairie, like prairies, meadows, Prairie Up. And I'm going to show you some designs that are based on his philosophies. And he's very interesting. And that's his yard in the front with all the trees and the native plants. He's different than everyone else. He hasn't influenced them yet, but he's even got the front. He's even got the front yard. You know how these neighborhoods have these little patches, on each side of the driveway stuff. He's got everything planted in native plants, and he's fascinating to listen to. Does a lot of webinars and such. So if you're serious about designing, map it out. It doesn't have to be fancy like this. Just get you a piece of paper, and I use these. I started using. It's a pad you can get on Amazon or probably at the office supply stores too. It's 10 by 10, so it's it's graph paper, based like graph paper used in high school, but it's 10 squares in a darker square. So it's 10 by 10, so that's a 10 scale. So one little tiny block equals a foot. So you can actually sketch out your yard on one of those pads, and by measuring it and sketch out how big it is, and you can start designing and playing around with some ideas. But basically, first, identify if you have any invasive plants that you need to remove. That would be my first suggestion, is getting rid of, and sometimes it's hard and it takes time, so you can't do it all at once, but do identify your invasive plants. And again, I reference you back to the Lisa Tompkins presentation. And then decide what plants you want to keep. Is there anything you want to get rid of? Decide, this is what I'm going to keep. This is my yard. So now you look at that and you say, okay, what areas do I want to start with? Like I said before we got started, we were talking about the gentleman we did a garden tour with last weekend. He did all the front yard, all the backyard, all at once, 7,000 plants, boom, right? And it's gorgeous. But who has the time or the money or the help to do that? None of us, I don't. So think, you may want to think of a plan overall, but you're probably going to want to start small, right? Start with what you can manage. So you've got to set your priorities, and what is it you want to do, and how much money do you have? You can buy seeds, you can buy plugs, which are cheaper than buying a full quart plant and such, and you can decide on your how to get started. So what types of plants? Again, trees and shrubs, deciduous, evergreen, kind of coniferous. We don't have too many evergreens and native plants, big shrubs, but we do have some really good ones. And so you can look, if you really want evergreen, there are some that you can use. And graminoids, which are native grasses. And so you have sedges, rushes, grasses that you can consider in those. What we used to call ornamental grasses. Just be sure, like miscanthus is terribly invasive, so just be sure that you're getting something that's not invasive. And then forbs are the flowering plants, the beauty that you add, the color. Don't forget about green as a color. When you look at go back to your yard, look at all the greens you have. I've seen some gorgeous designs that are mostly green, and it can be so powerful. So don't forget about the greens. And grasses are great for that, right? And then legumes are something you can consider adding too. So finding them, you probably won't find them at Lowe's or Home Depot. And my local chapter website has some native plant sources if you want to go and look at our website. You can get to it from wildones.org. You can get to our chapter website from there. So matrix planting is one thing. If you want to put a little meadow somewhere in your yard, or maybe a really dense planting, because typically with native plants, it's not that you're going to plant a meatball here and a green meatball here and a green meatball here and mulch all between them, right? What we want is density. That's what helps wildlife. We want density. And plus, it's less weeding once they get established because they're together. So typically to plant on 12-inch centers is what I would recommend. Even if something's going to get a little bit bigger, that's just a good rule of thumb for your forbs, your perennials. But here, matrix planting is where you're creating a carpet of a certain plant on 12-inch centers, and then you're adding the beauty to it in a very organized design. So in this, it creates green mulch being plants and not other types of mulches, leaves, bark, and things like that. Maybe that when you first plant this, you may have to put a thin layer of hardwood mulch to begin with, because you do have to worry about weeds. But if you don't till up your yard, you'll have less weeds, right? You just want to plant into your yard. It's scalable, it's repeatable. So if you like this, you could repeat it a couple times. And you can do it by, like I said, seeds. Plugs is the best way to do it. And I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. So basically you start with a matrix, right? So you can use that same paper we talked about. And so something here, you'd want to determine why is my picture not showing? Oh, there it goes. So you want to determine what you want as your matrix plant, your base plant. And an example is in a sunny location, you know, a carex, Eastern Star carex, one of the carex. Purple love grass is a good one, but something as your green base. And then you start adding your forbs and you decide where you want those. And you say, I have them in clumps or in sweeps. There's coneflower added. So you see how I'm building this design, but I've got my base. And this is for a place that you don't want them too far on the edge. You want to consider, is this a garden that's going to be walked around? So you want short things on the outside and tall things towards the center, or is it going to be against a wall? Then you want short things here, moving up to taller things against the wall. So this is just an idea of how to very easily organize and plan a garden. And this is what's typically done. You buy the plugs, you lay them out. These are probably 12 by 12 on the floor. Sorry, in Zoom, you can't see these, but our tile on the floor is 12 inches. So you just put, you just randomly put it about 12 inches apart. And that's what a plug looks like. And you just make a hole and stick it in. And look at that. This is what you can have with a meadow like that. Isn't that gorgeous? I wish I had that in my yard. I just love it. Look at the edge. See the nice clean edge there that they have? Who wants that? Yeah, I do. All right. So again, the benefits to a meadow design garden now in that grid, right, is weed control because you've got that base plant that once it gets established. Now the first year, you're going to have to water, and remember, you got to water that first year, and you've got to identify your weeds, remove your weeds. If they're annual weeds, just cut them. You won't disturb the soil. Every time you pull a weed, you're exposing more seeds to the sun. So if it's annual, you can just clip it. But of course, if it's perennial, you want to take it out. It gives you erosion control because you do have that cover of your matrix plant, your base plant. The cues to care that we talked about. And because it's a planned design, it's not just seeds that, I kind of don't like just throwing out wildflower, native plant seeds because you do get that. I mean, there's a place for that. But if you're trying to do a cues, garden that really looks like it's intentional, by planting them in certain places instead of using seeds, it really gives you that. In the front yard, that's probably a good way to go. Long season color, and plus you have that interesting evergreen base. When you've got the stems that can show all winter, and then you trim those back in the spring when the new plants come out. It's great for habitat, little hiding places that the insects can go and birds can go. It's repeatable. Like I said, you liked it, you put it here, you like it, let's do it over there. It's very repeatable. And again, the watering. So I have this book up here. I recommend some books if you're interested in learning more about gardening for wildlife. And that's really what it is. It's gardening for wildlife. If you're planting native plants and trying to work towards that 70% native plants as best you can over time, right? But this is a great book. Doug Tallamy wrote this. I don't know what year this one was, but he wrote it with Rick Dark, and they both shared a lot of the pictures that are in here. It's a great book. And you can, after the session, if you want to come up and look at some of these books I've got. And then the other ones I have, I couldn't find my Prairie Up book, but if you look over there, that's the Benjamin Vogt book that I talked about, VOGT. It's funny spelling. Prairie Up is the matrix plan, and he goes into a lot of detail in that book. It's very good. And then Planning in a Post-Wild World is excellent. Thomas Rayner and Claudia West. And this is an excellent book on new ways to garden. Let's see what else. Oh, this is my new favorite. It's my new favorite. This is Pete Udoff. He is from, oh, sorry. Oh, I want to show you here. He is from Europe. I'm trying to think. Denmark, Norway. Udoff, is that? Yeah. Yeah, I think he lives now in somewhere in Europe, but he's the one that designed the New York High Line. Y'all know about the High Line, where they took the old old train tracks and made this gorgeous 1.5 mile garden. He designed it. So you know that's his style. And he changed his life. When people see his garden, to talk about leaving the stems and the beauty of a winter garden. This is my new favorite book. I just got it about 2 months ago. It's really good. And then I have some others here that I didn't put pictures. So this is Garden Revolution, Larry Weiner. It's a very good book too about how our landscapes can be a source of environmental change. You know, we think we can't do anything about climate change. You think these humans have really destroying the earth, and we can't. What can we do? We feel helpless. This is what we can do. This is what we can do with climate change, is to help our insects. We can do that in our yard. And Doug Talamy has started this group called Homegrown National Park. Again, we can't leave the national parks and preserves up to taking care of this. We need to do it. So if you Google and go to his site, Homegrown National Park, it's got a wealth of information. Let's see, what else? There's the living landscape. I think this is Benjamin Boat's other book, his first book, A New Garden Ethic. He's pretty radical. This is kind of a radical book, okay? But it's very interesting. Yeah. Okay, so do your research too. If you're really serious about doing some design, look at gardening magazines, look in your neighbor's yard. What do you like about their yard? What is this? Maybe a certain style you like. Not the invasive plants though. Look at public gardens. So Wing Haven in Charlotte has a children's garden that is all native plants. That's where I worked. Up at UNC Charlotte, there's a section of their botanical gardens that is all native plants, designed by Larry Mellichamp, who used to be many years the gardener, the curator of that garden up there. Many native plants in this garden as well. So you can learn about native plants by walking through the garden here that's managed by the master gardeners. If you want to look at what they look like and what they look like in the winter, coming up in the fall is the best time to plant perennials. So this is a really good time to start planting your garden. So looking at these, there are some different groups have free webinars. Wild Ones has free webinars. I'll show you some of those coming up. If you're on Facebook, there's some great groups on Facebook about native plants that you can follow, and people ask questions, and I learn a lot on those too. And then do a Google search. But these have some, let me show you this. So I always tell, if you look up at the top right corner, I always give this Google tip, because a lot of people don't know this, is when you put a term into Google and you do a space, you do cite with the colon, and then if you put what the ending, like edu or org, you will only get like educational sites, like the educational universities that have these great garden information, or org, where you can get like the things that organizations like Wild Ones and different things. You can search that way. But there's places that have sample designs that are free to you that you can get. The Garden Gate magazine has garden plans that are free on their website. North Carolina Native Plant Society has some sample garden plans. The North Carolina State Extension Plant Toolbox, they call it Gallery. I think it's called Gallery, I think. And they have just some wonderful designs there with a lot of special types of gardens that you want to put in. And Wild Ones has some, and I'm going to show you how to find those. We have some wonderful designs. So if you go to our website, wildones.org, and I've got an arrow that shows you, if you click on programs right there, and you see I have circled native garden plans. If you go to that, you might want to take a picture of that. There we have 19 different designs, and they're full design, and they're by professionals. And so this is a design for Greensboro, North Carolina. It was done by Preston Montague, who is a friend of mine that has a business up in Raleigh. And he designed this. He's described all the plants that he put in it. He tells why. He's got a video explaining why he did it. And it's our eco region. So I recommend that you look at this, and you can even download the design and print it out. It's a full 11 by 17, I think, when you print it. And he's got all the information, all the plants, and it's great. I definitely recommend that. And then when you're on that site looking at the garden plan, at the top, right there, if you click on the Get Started or the Client Resilient Landscapes, you'll see all the information that in these flyers that we have that we sent out. I didn't have enough to bring for everybody, but that information is right there on top of that garden plan. I'll show it. So these are the brochures that I'm showing. So the information in these brochures is on that website. Okay, so let's just look at a few more ways. I couldn't finish without giving a few more ways to really help biodiversity. Reduce your turf, reduce your lawn, just enlarge your beds. If you ever heard the soft landings story where you have everything under your tree through the tree line, with the edge of the tree line, all that should be mulch or small plants, where when the caterpillars, when the insects and the caterpillars fall, that they have something soft to get into in the leaves or tucked away in plants. It really helps. And then, expand your beds, plant a butterfly garden, a rain garden. I have a brochure up here about rain gardens if you'd like to take one. Like I said, plant an oak tree. It's number one. Enlarge your mulch area under the trees, leave the leaves, save the stems, as we said, and turn out your lights. It really confuses the moths, and moths are great pollinators. And we're losing our moths too. We don't know as much about moths as we know about butterflies and our daytime insects. But I think there's a moth night scheduled with the Marsh Group in Marvin this month or next month. They're a lot of fun to look at moths at night. And or use a motion sensor so it only comes on when there's someone in your yard. I use yellow lights. Remember the old-fashioned yellow lights? Yeah. So if you plant your native plants, they will come. It's just amazing what you'll see in your yard. And I'm going to close with a story too that I meant to tell you when we talked about insects. Do you remember, those of you that are around my age, do you remember driving on vacation with your parents and we didn't get good gas mileage, right? So you were stopping for gas pretty often. Every time you stopped for gas, someone had to clean. Back then you had full service gas stations. Someone would come out and clean your windshield. Why? It was covered in bugs. I drove 3 hours to Cullowhee, North Carolina last week and had one bug. Think about it. Do you ever get bugs on your windshield anymore? I can remember they would get on the grill of the car. So really, it's really true. We need to help our insects because we are losing them. So I hope that you will consider doing some in your yard, planting natives. We do have some free webinars. So if you go to the wildones.org, you'll see these listed. Just page down, you'll see we have 3 free webinars coming up. And there's some of the past ones, I think you can see the recordings. Yeah, if you go to wildones.org/events, it takes you right there. If you
Came home with the car packed.
Uh-oh. Oh, it's so if you're interested in joining Wild Ones, you can find us off the wildones.org website. We also have a Facebook page, Wild Ones Charlotte Piedmont. We'd love for you to join our Facebook page. You can, if you want to get on our mailing list and not join, you want to just try us out, email me at wildonescharlottepiedmont@gmail.com, and I'll add you to our non-member mailing list. And we do a lot of things that are open to everyone. We did have a garden tour that was only for members this past week because we had limits the number of people that went. But most of our events, we started doing social events, which are a lot of fun. And then we have speakers. We do meetings at nature centers and things like that. So we'd love to have you. Sure. Yeah, hornets aren't so nice, but okay, repeat the question. Is when I talk about bees, am I talking about all bees? Hornets, wasps? Definitely talking about wasps. Hornets, I'm not going to invite more hornets to my yard. So no, hornets are a different thing, but yellow jackets are wasp, and they're, unless you bother them, they're not going to bother you. I have a wasp nest right above my back door, and I haven't moved it. I go in and out that door all the time. They never bother me. I leave them there because so yes, I'm talking about mostly the bees, though. The wasps are endangered too, but especially the native bees, because it's the habitat. They don't build a separate nest. They go into the ground or to the stems of trees. I mean, stems of our perennials and such, and they find little places to go, and they're the ones that are really, really endangered. Yes. She's new to the area, new to fire ants. Yeah, they're not. If they're in a place where you're going to be, you need to get rid of them. Yeah. Okay, Debbie just said to Google NCSU fire ants. Red imported fire ants. Yeah, we don't want those. So, yeah. And I got about 6 or 7 bites the other week, and it's not fun. So, yes.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation. That is exactly what I was looking for. But my practical question is, where to get this pen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I have a difficulty with this design. I can talk to you layout, but where to get this done?
Okay. She said she enjoyed the presentation, but where do you get the plants? So you've heard the term cultivars, right? So you're going to more likely you'll find a lot of cultivars. And cultivars are okay. Maybe that makes them shorter where it's going to fit under your window and things like that. But what you don't want is something that changes the color of the flower or makes a double flower, because the insects, that confuses the insects. So can you not hear me? Okay, sorry.
Where do you find these plants? Where do you?
That's what I'm getting ready to tell you. Yeah. So if you go to like Lowe's or Home Depot, you may find native plants that are cultivars. Okay, so you may find those, but if you go to our website at wildones.org and go to chapters and find our website, and it's right there too, charlottepiedmont.wildones.org, I have a web page that lists some sources. Okay.
But not just the low kind of $50, $1.
Right.
More than that.
Right, exactly. Well, and the list gives some local places and it gives some mail order places. Like Izell Plants is great. They sell plugs and plants and from wholesale nurseries that you can't go buy from. But they're like a clearinghouse. They'll allow you to buy from these wholesale plants because they are the and I tell you,
What's their name?
Izell, Izel Plants. And I tell you, they have a ton of resources on their website. Izel Plants is a great source. Yes.
2 Japanese beetles.
Yeah, they're not native. So
But
I don't know.
They're eating my leaf. They're
Yeah.
gone now.
Yeah.
They came and they.
yeah, they're not good. I'm sure the master gardeners can help you with that. I don't
What
know.
do we do? That's spring.
Chicken's like,
Chicken, yeah. Someone asked me,
don't use the trap, because
that draws them in, the pheromones, yeah. And someone asked me about the tomatoes. I don't want to keep the tomato worms on my tomatoes because they're eating my tomato plants. Take it off and put it in your bird feeder. Give it right to your birds. Take it off your tomato plant.
I know the objective of having a native garden is less water, and then you said there's not really a need to fertilize.
Right.
However, like if you're planting in an area that's not like the topsoil has kind of been scraped away and it's really compacted, do you recommend amending the soil in any way?
Typically, no, but compost
Okay.
on top. Yes, yes, because it's going to break down. You start digging in the soil. I mean, if it's so compacted you can't even dig into it, you may have to, yes, amend it. But I'd use compost. Yeah. So the question was, how do you plant in this clay soil? Sorry, I didn't repeat the question at first. Okay, was there another question over here? Yes.
One of the first pictures was the goldenrod. Now we have a big pasture. and I do walk around out there and
Mhm.
pull stuff out. Now, is that where I would find native? Where did that goldenrod?
Goldenrod is native, and goldenrod is one of those keystone plants. You want to keep the goldenrod. And there's a myth about goldenrod. Goldenrod does not cause allergies. It's the airborne plants that cause allergies. Goldenrod has to be pollinated by insects, okay? It's the ragweed that is blown through the air that causes the allergies, or the pine. There's people that are allergic to pine. Pine is air pollinated. It's the air pollinated plants and goldenrod. Yes, plant goldenrod. I have like 5 different species in my yard. It's a great plant. And it blooms in September. It blooms really late. So you think about that succession blooming, something in the spring, something in the summer, something that goes through the summer. And then you have asters or goldenrod in the fall for great fall color, early or late summer color.
Is that what I need to do, is walk around in fields and dig it out, or?
Well, we don't recommend.
I do that, I'll see something.
Yeah. I can't recommend going and digging out native plants. It's more like it's best to, like, if you want that, get some seeds, native plant seeds.
Nobody that sells native.
Oh, yes. Yes. If you go to our website,
That's where,
yes, charlottepiedmont.wildones.org,
Okay.
I have a list there of local sources. Lisa Tompkins spoke. She has her own business and she sells native plants. It's by appointment only, but she grows them all and she's great. So if you want something local, Lisa has some great plants. Absolutely. Yes.
The Master Gardeners have a sale several times a year. And what we do is pull different types of species that we're growing in the seed.
Can you start?
April.
We've actually have 3. But anyway, we have this plant sale. And what we'll do is take our excess from the teaching garden when it's time to divide everything and pot it up. And then we sell those. And then all the money comes back towards maintaining the teaching garden. Okay, so we have one coming up in September.
So the next garden plant sale here is in October. And on our website too, with the plant sources, we have a list of local plant sales. And thank you for saying that. That is a great point. UNC Charlotte has one, and they have a huge amount of native plants. Winghaven has one, has some native plants. We have one at Central Piedmont, a few native plants. I hope we'll have more this year. And most of these are twice a year. One in the spring, because it's different plants, right? You're going to plant in the spring, then you're going to plant in the fall, typically. So yeah, the plant sales are great, but they might not be happening when you want the plant. So there's a list. And a lot of the list we have is in Charlotte, but there's some in around the area, but there's some mail orders as well, which the person that I said that planted 7,000 plants in his yard, I think they were all mail order. They come in a box and he had no problem with this. A lot of plugs, a lot of it were plugs and they worked great. Daniel.
One of the great places to buy plants is from
Hold this.
one of the nice places to buy plants is from farmers markets. There are a lot of small growers and they specifically focus on native plants. And they're in various, I know that the Matthews Farmers Market has one of my favorite folks, Lisa Tompkins, over there selling native plants. And so the various Charlotte markets also do.
Great, thank you. Love your
Thank
question.
you, Linda.
Thank you, everyone.